What's up guys, Lou here, and I wanted to sit down to do a quick comparison video of the two hottest products possibly on the planet right now, the PS4 and the Xbox One. There's a lot of controversy going on, a lot of arguments going on in comment sections on a number of YouTube videos, so I wanted to sit down and give you guys my take, give you guys my personal, professional opinion on what the hell is going on. But before we get into that, I do want to go over the specs of both of the systems. For those of you guys that have been, I don't know, hiding under a rock or something like that, this is how it breaks down. To start, we've got the price. Price is $399 on the PS4 and $499 on the Xbox One. That being said, the Xbox One does include the Kinect sensor, and you will need the Kinect sensor in order to operate the system. So a lot of people are speculating that that's part of the reason that you have a higher price point to start. If you're into motion-based gaming, then you'd need to add the PlayStation Eye to the PS4, and that's around another 60 bucks, I believe, at this point. So if that's something you're into, you're going to get closer to price parity. But I do like the fact, of course, that on the PlayStation side of things, you don't need to have it in order to operate the system, and you don't need to buy it if you don't envision yourself using it. They both have Blu-ray/DVD optical drives, so that's the same. They both have the ability to record gameplay. There is gameplay DVR functionality built in. They've both got 8 gigabytes of RAM, but it's a little bit different. It's GDDR5 on the PS4, whereas it's just regular DDR3 on the Xbox One. That might sound like a major improvement, but what you guys need to remember is the majority of games here that you're going to play on either platform are going to be cross-platform. And more than likely, performance and appearance on both will be relatively similar. There is a slight performance edge to the PS4 on this front, but from a general sort of gameplay standpoint, I don't envision this making any kind of huge improvement on your games, and it's probably not the most important decision-making factor. The CPU is also very similar. You're dealing with an 8-core AMD chip on both of them. They both got 500 gigabyte hard drives. External storage is to be announced on the Sony PS4. It is definitely supported on the Xbox One via USB. It will likely be supported on both. Once again, no real game changer there. Cloud storage is available on both. This is where things, when we start talking about software, this is where things get a little bit more squirrely. There are mandatory game installs on the Xbox One side, and as you guys have probably heard, this has to do with some of the DRM that's going to go into the Microsoft ecosystem, the inability to just swap games, to use a disc and play a game anywhere on any console. This is probably the single most controversial topic, is this idea of DRM, no used games, no renting of games. Now, Microsoft has come out. They did have a press release, or it might be on their official website, where they stated that there will be authorized retailers that are able to sell used games, but this is all really shady right now. Nobody has specifics on it, and it sounds like it's going to be a complicated process, so we're going to have to wait to find out more about that. But we definitely know that the PS4 has no such restrictions when it comes to used games, when it comes to sharing games, and when it comes to mandatory game installs. The other controversial topic is the required internet connection. It's been said now that the Xbox One is going to need to connect to the internet once every 24 hours to remain operational. For a lot of people, this is no big deal, and I know myself included. I've got internet all the time and everywhere, and I personally get pretty freaked out when I lose the internet in any one place. So that's not a huge issue, but I do know that this happens to be an issue for some users, or else it wouldn't be getting the press and coverage that it is. It's not just, I suppose, a question of whether or not you've got internet, but also a question of privacy. People don't like the idea of an always-on system staring at you with a mandatory connect in your living room at all times, and I can understand their concerns. Whether or not it's doing anything shady or not, it's still a little bit disconcerting to know that that's a requirement and that the system won't function without any of that. Or potentially, if anything is to change in the future in terms of how Microsoft runs their business, and if your entire game library is tied into this DRM ecosystem, who knows just how mobile your game library will be. We don't know yet. Kinect 2 does also offer up motion control for your gaming, so it's not just strictly this device that you can use for interacting with the system. So potentially speaking, if you go to the PS4 side, you would need to add the PlayStation Move, and then on top of that, the PlayStation Eye. So there's a couple of different devices you would need. So it's not just the Eye, and things could get a little bit more expensive, but you know, my opinion on motion-based gaming is that we're not really there yet. It's not something that a lot of people are going to be buying these consoles for, at least not myself and a lot of people that I've talked to. It's not this deal breaker kind of issue, and so I don't think that really weighs too much into the average consumer's decision making on whether or not they want to get which system they want to get. Second screen, this is something I would probably give the edge to the Xbox One on, because smart glass will be supported, so you'll have the ability to interface with your console with, you know, a tablet if you choose to do that. Of course, you can have second screen functionality on the PS4 using the PlayStation Vita, so there is an option there. Subscription services have not got a lot of coverage, and I tend to believe this has something to do with the fact that you know, it's been hidden underneath all of this controversy regarding the always-on and used game situation. But you will need a PlayStation Plus membership. As things look right now, you will need a PlayStation Plus membership, just like you've always needed an Xbox Live membership to take advantage of multiplayer. If you look at the slide from their official presentation, it also identifies PlayStation multiplayer, etc., as being one of the bullet points underneath PlayStation Plus. So that's something worth considering. There is a slightly extended cost in order to play online, but it's once again similar across both platforms. The other thing, the last thing to mention in terms of differences from a hardware perspective is the region locking. PS4s will not be region locked, so that means you can play games from anywhere in the world and you can take your console anywhere in the world and have it function properly, whereas the Xbox One will be region locked, so that's something worth considering. So that should give you guys a better idea of the hardware specifications of each of the two consoles, but the thing to remember here more than anything is that they are more similar than they are different. The fact that they're both running 8-core processors from AMD, and also the fact that most titles are going to be cross-platform, means that the actual gaming experience should be very similar on each of the two consoles, and hardware probably shouldn't be the sole reason why you select one of the consoles over the other. If there is a bit of an edge, it likely goes to the PS4 for having that GDDR5 memory, but other than that, like I said, don't make your decision strictly based on hardware. So the things that have been talked about most in terms of analyzing these two consoles are obviously the ones that have gotten the most exposure: the DRM, the fact that your Xbox always has to be on, you can't share games, can't rank games, etc. Before I get there, I want to talk about price, because price to me is maybe the #1 consideration when a person walks into a store. That's money out of your pocket for a product, and you have to take a look at what you're going to be getting back. So there's a $100 price difference, even though the hardware is incredibly similar. Yes, as I mentioned before, the Xbox One does have that built-in ability to look at television content in a very unique way. Television is not a big part of my life, so it's very hard for me to give that, say, $100 value. Kinect is not a big part of my life, so it's hard for me to give it any kind of significant value either. That being said, to somebody out there in the world, I know it's valuable to you, so there's no reason to jump into the comments and freak out. I think people are going to walk through a store this holiday season, if you haven't pre-ordered already. They'll walk through a store this holiday season when the next gen consoles launch, and they'll be comparing the two. And you're going to have some nice little package put together by Sony, which is going to be the console, a couple games, maybe an extra controller, who knows what. And it's likely still going to be less money than the base model Xbox One, or at least it'll be less money than the Xbox One equivalent bundle. And around Christmas time, people are really, you know, sort of scrounging around for money. They're trying to come up with gifts for everyone, and $100 is significant, especially right now while people are having, you know, economic issues and can't necessarily indulge themselves in consumer electronics like they once could. So I think this is probably the #1 reason why the PlayStation 4 is going to have success. If you remember in the past with the PlayStation 3, when it launched, it was significantly higher priced, and that resulted, in my opinion, in, or partly at least, in the success that the Xbox 360 had here in North America by being the more affordable solution, at least for a while. So price is a very, very important consideration, especially for people who are buying this thing as a gift. And if you look on Amazon right now at pre-orders, I believe the PlayStation 4 is still ahead of the Xbox One in terms of pre-orders. I think people really want to hold on to their $100 right now. What I wish would have happened is that Microsoft, created an Xbox One option that didn't include the Kinect, didn't require the Kinect, and gave people options. Options are never a bad thing. If you've only got $3.99 to spend, you can decide whether or not you need the Kinect as part of your experience and then add it later like they've done in the past. I don't think that system is broken or ever was or is broken today, so they should have stuck with a tried and true system for modular upgradability. When you see a component you need, you go out and get it. But point of entry is very important, and having a $3.99 point of entry is a hell of a lot better than having a $4.99 point of entry, and I think it'll be a major, major component in the success of the PlayStation 4 this particular generation. The next thing I want to talk about is something that hasn't been talked about all that much, and that is ecosystems. On both of these systems, you're going to be able to port over your progress, your trophies, etc. from previous gen consoles. And a lot of people have invested a lot of time and a lot of energy in building up their profiles in each of those two ecosystems. Not just their profiles, but their friends lists and all kinds of things. And maybe more importantly than that, they've had to argue with people over the course of the last few years over which ecosystem was better for them to be in. And of course, the truth was for a long time that the best ecosystem for a lot of people was the Xbox 360 or the Xbox Live ecosystem. So it's hard for people to make a hard shift, for people to make a hard change, for people to see a video or to see some specifications, say, you know what, it's time for me to move over to PlayStation, or vice versa. It's time for me to move over to Xbox. It's not an easy decision to make, so I understand why people are so passionate about this. They've invested a lot of time in becoming, branded on one side or the other. But if you look at this from, a blank consumer perspective, somebody who's never owned either one and walks into the store, which is really the way that you should look at a lot of consumer electronics purchases, then the perspective changes a little bit. You sit there and you say, well, my considerations are different now because I'm not tied in to a specific ecosystem. As you guys know, your investment in games, for example, in the past, has really helped dictate what ecosystem you stick with. If you've got a bunch of Xbox 360 games on the shelf, the likelihood that you're going to want to convince your friends to also get an Xbox 360 is much, much higher. But I see this new console generation as an opportunity to start fresh, an opportunity to just pick whichever one is better for you, whichever one you think sounds better on paper, or whichever one you can afford for that matter, and then, go from there. Don't worry so much about where you're coming from, where your allegiances were. There's really no purpose to be allied with a hardware component. It's just a tool. It just gets a job done, and for the most part, it should be entertaining you, not forcing you to go on the internet and vent and be angry. If your console is making you angry, or your console allegiance is making you angry, something is wrong, something is broken. You shouldn't have to defend anything. Whichever product is better will win, and you can be a part of that success or failure for that matter. But most importantly, remember that whichever one you choose, it's about entertainment. So go out, get your entertainment, and there's no need to come on here and vent, etc. You shouldn't have to do that if you believe in your choice. If you're happy with your choice and you want to see success in your choice, then you shouldn't have to do that. My advice for you is to really just analyze the data that's out there. Stop thinking about where you stood in the past or how many people you convinced to be on a specific platform. Look at these things as they are in the modern format with the modern specifications and the data that's available to us right now. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say that so far, based on the information that I have, the PlayStation 4 looks like the better value. I like the way that Sony has played the PR. I like the way they came out and have been just really casual, really upfront about the used game situation. And that's a feature that we've always had and we shouldn't have to fight for. The pricing, which as I said before, is really, really important. People care about it a lot. And then the last factor, not having to have an always-on connection, which, as I said, in my opinion, not nearly as big a deal as it's being made to be, but nonetheless some kind of requirement that is really unnecessary. Whether it's a big deal or not, it's unnecessary. So why is it there? You have to wonder, you have to ask questions. I'm not a huge conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but it is there, and it really doesn't need to be there in order for you to play your games. The only reason it could be there is to verify DRM or who knows what else. That's not really for us to have to understand. All we have to do is sit there and be entertained. We shouldn't even have to consider something like that. The other thing that's really pissing me off is the way that the Microsoft PR people or the Microsoft representatives are sort of brushing off all of these concerns that are going on in this massive online community here on YouTube, Reddit, everywhere else. Everywhere that people are talking about this, they're just avoiding it. And where they're not avoiding it, they're actually slipping up even further. You have this new video that came out where they're basically telling people to keep playing their Xbox 360, kicking them to the curb, saying next gen is not for you if you have issues with, the new one. I don't really think that's the right play. You have to pay attention to what people are saying, and you can make adjustments. You don't need to be dead set in a certain way, and I think they're coming off as arrogant more than anything else in not even really addressing people's concerns. The concerns are real. Microsoft needs to man up, come out, talk about them, potentially make changes, at least make people feel a little bit more comfortable about why these things are there and how they're going to be implemented more specifically. Just being quiet about it, avoiding it, or further entrenching themselves in it is not doing them any favors, and it basically built the entire PR engine for the Sony Electronics Group, because all they had to do is come out and say, oh, hey, our console doesn't do any of those things. Our console is just like other consoles. It's like older consoles. It can do all the things you'd expect a console to do. I mean, that's the greatest PR platform they ever could have come up with, and they didn't even create it. Microsoft created it for them by causing all of these issues or creating these issues that didn't need to exist that people obviously care about. YouTube is the perfect representation of that. You can check down below when you're looking at the thumbs up and thumbs down on this particular video. People do care. You do care. I do care. And if Microsoft wants to play ball in this particular marketplace, they have to pay attention to the people they're trying to sell shit to. Anyways, that's my take. You could call me a PS4 fanboy. I'm just analyzing the data. This is what's available to us right now. If you guys enjoyed this content, if you appreciate, my take on it, please remember to leave a thumbs up down below. You could do one better and share this video with your friends as well. Hopefully you can help people out there understand where all this information is coming from and why people feel the way that they feel. Other than that, I guess that's it. I could ramble on for way too long, so I'm going to let you guys go right now. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Later.